Shit happens, man. All right.
We started already?
Everything is recording. We are starting.
Then I'll wait till the second hour. Fuck.
Let it process. Let it process.
No, I was just going to get my water bottle, but...
Oh, man, go get your water bottle, man. Let me do the introduction real quick here. Hey, folks, what is this? The 8th? We are here. Yeah. Welcome to Bouncing Brains. We are here August 8th. No, September 8th. I lost a month. Yeah, this is episode 78. Anybody who's paying attention will notice we opened up the last episode saying 78. We had to cut an episode, so yada yada. And anybody paying attention might notice that the setup is a little bit different. Moment of silence for our good buddy Leo. He's not dead. He's just dead to us. Playing with you, Leo. Playing with you, brother. But yeah, we're changing the setup here. And if you don't know, you should know. I'm Sean Hatfield. He's off the mic, but that's Freddy G. Joining us today in studio, we have a friend of the podcast back. Dude, it's been more than a year since we had you in here before, right? Yeah. Poet, director, producer at this point.
No. Not there yet, but, you know.
You tell me, running the lights, all that. Dude, at the point where you're doing more than 2 things on a production, you're a producer. They may not say that on the paycheck.
Hey, we just had this conversation off camera. Dream big. You ain't dreaming big enough. If your dreams don't scare you, you
we have a producer. We have a producer, man. But yeah, I definitely dive into a lot of areas of production.
Look, it's real easy. You give him executive producer, and then you just take regular old producer. It's like, it's cool, man. It's cool. I'll just be a regular old producer.
I'd like to start off today's episode by bringing up an old thing I used to do. Y'all remember that whole fuck Amy Schumer thing? Hi, man. Amy Schumer, I still don't like you, but do your thing. But today I do want to let y'all know, fuck Walmart. I'm their greaseball ass. Fuck Walmart. Well, no. Hold on. I'll take that back. Not every Walmart. I'm gonna treat it like everybody else. Not everybody's the same. You've heard that before. I'm pretty sure not every Walmart has pricks and assholes. So just fuck the Walmart on Jackson Avenue in McAllen. Fuck Walmart. Fuck them in the greaseball ass. Welcome to the Bouncing Brains.
Yeah, the walls were never going to give us any money. In fucking Arkansas Hicks. I'll buy you Chinese
Jackson
products.
Street, man. Fuck that Jackson Street. I'm kidding.
It's not even real Jackson Street. There's 2 Jackson Streets, and that ain't the real one.
This episode is being brought to you by Fiji Water. I'm kidding. No,
they make great refillable bottles. And I can't pronounce the name of this vodka, or I'd give them a shout out.
I thought that was water, but okay. I think that.
Are we trying to be sponsorship friendly? We've already said fuck a couple people at this point.
Yeah.
I didn't even ask you, man. Would you care for a cocktail?
I'm good. Yeah,
cool.
Enjoy.
But anyway, man. Aside from all the other bullshit, man, how have you been? This is about you, not about Walmart. But fuck Walmart.
Well, you know, it's
been a year.
Just came from Walmart.
I had a lovely experience.
I had a lovely experience. I got myself some frozen food. Nah, man. I've been good, bro. A year, a lot has changed over a year, man. A lot of new projects, a lot of new things I've been working on, new opportunities opening in different places, silent moments, moments where it's just full blast working. And so, yeah, man, a year brings a lot, but definitely a lot more things going on in my projects. You know, I wasn't doing theater, I think I was barely getting into theater, right?
I think you had done at least 1 or 2 productions.
One play, yeah. Yeah, man, and I've been working hard at it, and it's been more productions, and it's been a blast, man. The different people I've worked with, the different audiences I've gotten to see, and then, you know, the open mic, the poetry, everything has been moving forward. So it's been a busy time, but lots of work.
Oh man, dude, I think at this point, you've been hosting the open mic there at Luna for going on 2+ years at this point, right?
2+ years, man, at Luna Coffee House.
What were you doing before that?
Nothing. Just wondering, man. Buying shit at Walmart. Nah, man. I've always been writing, and so you can say I was doing more of like diving into a lot of literature, getting through college, and pretty much that, right? Then I decided to. Well, I heard about the open mics that were being done over there at Europe, and I went out there. I read my first poem there, and that's pretty much. I really like presenting. I really like the whole idea of being part of that whole community and everything, and so that's what I'm doing now, right? Yeah.
And like, how did you? I was asking you off camera, but like, cause you're a poet, you write great shit. You've written a couple of anthologies.
Well, I had one anthology.
I thought there was two.
We were diving on the second one, but
that one never took off.
I didn't have really the time to finish it, to put it together. I had a lot of great work that was put into it. Sean was helping me out in some of the aspects of it.
Yeah, and Rudy was helping you too.
Yeah. We had some comedians come in and bring in some really interesting ideas. Unfortunately, man, I got so the theater and everything, and I decided to not go on that route for now. But maybe I jump back into creating an anthology later in the future.
Okay. No, I was just saying because I really did think that there were the two, and I thought the second one had taken off as well.
It was going a really nice direction. It was really nice, man.
If you don't mind disclosing the dirty details, like what was the point where it was like, all right, we can't. This isn't going to work out the way we want it to, because y'all had put a bunch of you and Nick, if I remember correctly, like he'd already started doing some of the artwork for the pieces. Basically,
man, it was such a vast concept that we were jumping into. I really feel that a project like that and the direction we were taking it really, really needed a lot of sit downs, a lot of I loved the idea so much. It was going to be titled #NoFilter. And we were going to go over things of why do people feel the need to express themselves on the media? How honest are we in the things that we share? What is the route that this is taking us in? And that conversation, I didn't want it to just breeze over, right? And so I couldn't put in a lot of the time that a project like that really, really required. And so I felt, you know what, for now I'm gonna go ahead and put it aside. But it was really, really interesting, and there's a lot that I learned from the project itself. A lot of very interesting thoughts. We talked about Rudy had mentioned things about like how the things we post is a lot like chisme, and how chisme has always been part of our the way we are as humans, and how that just reflects on our relationships in the internet. And so there was really, really interesting things going on. The project itself was very difficult to transcribe onto paper. There was a lot of it wasn't a simple project, man, and we dove into it in a lot of different directions. And it wasn't so simple for me to concise it, to put it all together, right?
I was going to ask you about that. It was editorially, that's where you were kind of...
I struggled editorially, man. I wish I had more experience as an editor, because the project really deserved it,
Yeah. I don't know if I said anything at the time, but like when you started telling me like, yeah, we're going to take this and then kind of like edit it down and then try to tie it together. And I'm going, ooh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Can he stick the landing? But yeah, man, ambitious as hell, man. You had, Rudy Barba,
Brian Ventura.
And
we had Luis Cantu. Yeah, man, It was really awesome. And then the ideas that Nick was bringing in for the imagery and the artwork, keeping it like with this like old school type of what's the name of that guy? The guy that does the cans.
That's not Warhol.
Yeah, it's Warhol.
Oh, was
yeah,
it?
We were gonna create some type of Warhol type of imagery. Now the project to me isn't entirely closed, right? I haven't entirely called it off, and if I ever get the opportunity to jump back in it, I really want to do it justice, right? But it's like, some stories, some poems, some projects that you just feel that it needs more time. It deserves more of your mind, more of your investment, and so it was mainly those reasons, the editorial reasons. But the project isn't entirely called off. Rabbit on the Moon was the name of the anthology, and we were always going to have different themes. It isn't entirely completely gone, and it might just come back at some point, hopefully.
Now, is this you've kind of backed away from the Rabbit on the Moon work altogether at this point?
At this point, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that. Was it? Do you think this is something that maybe like, maybe do the next Rabbit on the Moon anthology and kind of make this
something else for thing? I almost feel that would be something, man. I have thought about that, and it plays in my mind. Where am I gonna take it? A lot of the work that was submitted has already been the authors that submitted it have already published that work in other places, so it would have to start fresh again. It would require us completely jumping into the project all over again.
Right. Well, not to stick my 2 cents in there, but like I might even be interesting at this point, because at one point we had sat down for a good almost 3 or 4 hours there at Rudy's place one night and recorded with Rudy and Brian and you and Luis, and it might almost be interesting, because I mean there's Luis, for example, was talking a lot about the decentralization and kind of the distribution platforms that were available for some of this stuff.
Yeah, because in the theme of #NoFilter, we discussed a lot about how we filter everything through these like central ideas, and everything we talk about, everything we do, kind of has to be redirected through these filters. But the whole idea of decentralization was commenting on, well, maybe we don't need to necessarily express ourselves that way. And in many different areas, not just in expression, there's an opportunity to not, for instance, let's say in a classroom, typically the classroom, you have the teacher as the center figure, and everything gets filtered through the teacher. Then I remember when I moved, I was in high school, and I was one of the ones that was struggling with my grades, so I moved over to options. And in options, it was like a more learn on your own type of deal. And if you didn't understand something, you walked up to the teacher. But a lot of the learning it depended on the student. And then the student was like, "Oh, I don't really get this," and you would go to the teacher. But it wasn't, you right now in the classical classroom setup, you get a piece of literature. And you don't even read it, man. Like, you only read a couple of paragraphs off of it, and the rest of it, your teacher explains it to you. Right. So imagine if you would go in and you would read it yourself, and you would write essays where you're trying to understand what is going on. You're exploring ideas of your own, things that you have always had in your mind, and they're becoming clearer through the work. And whenever you have a difficulty with your expression or something doesn't completely fit, the teacher can guide you through that because of their experience, right? But it's not just a person kind of dictating this experience to you. You're gaining experience yourself because you're dwelling in it. You're experiencing. You're venturing into the work, right? So that was sort of the idea of hey, imagine if we don't always have to center everything through this filter. And we could just unfilter it by really, really exploring it.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember exactly there's one of those famous schooling methods that, unfortunately, I think it got tied in with some evangelical school of Christianity. But the whole idea of like, let the student, explore their various things and stuff like that. Also tied in with like eat graham crackers and don't masturbate, but that okay.
That sounds like you're centralizing it again, man.
Right. It's like you've just come full circle. Actually, as you were talking, I was thinking because we've had several conversations about like interpretation of literature and whatnot. Been a while. We got to do this more often, sir. But I'm thinking about like something like maybe Catcher in the Rye, which like I remember reading all the way through it, being very angry with the protagonist and all that, and then kind of over the years being exposed to like different interpretations and going, okay, gaining a grander scheme of it. And then I think about something like Tess de Uberville or whatever the fuck that book is called, where she gets raped in like the third chapter, and literally, if you're reading the novel, you can't even figure that out because it's just this overflowingly flowery language.
Okay.
And I think something like that almost, it's not even being read for the content itself, because the content itself is god awful and fucking boring, but like everybody's got their own little interpretations on top of it.
Okay.
And you end up exploring, like I've heard people like, all right, like, Catcher in the Rye, somebody goes, oh, well, this, unreliable narrative and maybe this happened and all that. And you go, okay, I can see that in the text. And then you look at something like de Uberville and you go, what the fuck? Did we read the same book? Like, I think you're just talking about some shit that your teacher talked about that they were talking about because their fucking teacher talked about. Like, where the hell is this interpretation coming from? And,
you could like try through what the work that you do, give yourself this idea that you are directing the audience towards a certain point, and then, unless it's like a commercial point where you're trying to get them to buy something, you might succeed there. But if you're trying to get them to come to a certain understanding of something, you always end up having the realization, hey man, the audience didn't really pick up what I was trying to say. Because the audience everybody lives their own, their own kind of reality, right? We share the same truths, but everybody kind of sees what they want to see. I saw, I was having this conversation once, with these Mormons that came over to the door, right? Yeah. Here we go. And here we go. Podcast. No central. Hashtag no filter. Yeah, man. They showed me this video, and they were saying, we were talking about homosexuality, right? And how they were saying, no, well, homosexuality is not in God's plan. Okay. They showed me this video of these people under umbrellas, and it's raining, and they're covering themselves from the rain, and then they take off the umbrella. One of them takes off the umbrella, and it's like, the rain feels so good, right? And I was saying, well, the way I interpret that is like, well, the person feels kind of like they can't really voice themselves. They feel sheltered, and they decide to put those like dogmas, those ideas aside, and kind of accept who they really are, accept the rain. And then the way they said it was like, no. The umbrella is the sin. The umbrella is homosexuality and all these things. And you take off the umbrella and you accept God's real plan, right? So everybody will always take what their reality is from the work that you do, it's really impossible when it comes to literature and when you're dealing with I'm going to say matters of the soul, to really get everybody to come into the same agreement, because everybody has their own soul. Everybody has their own life. And everything they see builds upon that reality.
Right. Well, like I'm just picturing that with like some dude in a silk shirt going, I'm not getting this wet. Fuck off.
Yeah, right. That's what the other people were thinking.
Something a little more contemporary would be, you've seen the movie, Donnie Darko? With Jake Gyllenhaal back in, 2001 or whatever the fuck it was?
Oh, no, I'm confusing it with Donnie Brasco.
Oh, yeah. Much different movie.
Wrong one. Yeah. No.
But no, with Donnie Darko, it was,
okay.
He, if you remember, if you don't, it doesn't really matter, because that's part of what I'm saying is it's the interpretation. That he put out the theatrical version, which it was much more subjective. Like you could kind of interpret it in your own way, and like, this happened, this means that, and all that. And then he got a little cash under his belt and went back and redid the director's cut and basically explained all the weird, nonsensical shit that he'd done. And like, there were a lot of people that reacted very negatively to that, because they were like, one, you've killed the mystery. Yeah. And two, that's not what I thought you were saying.
Yeah.
And almost at this point, you get people going, well, fuck it. I like the theatrical version because I can make up my own little bullshit in between, and fuck your explanations.
It's always best to, like, you can interpret work as the way it relates to you personally, and then you can interpret work as the way that you feel it might relate to the author. I don't like to dwell so much on, when people come up with like movie theories, it's like, this movie's coming out, and what if this means that this character is gonna do this and that, and they get all tangled up in the movie theory. And I always feel like, to be honest, like it's whatever the author chooses to do, the direction it's gonna take. Like, you watch something like Marvel, and they come up with like a multiverse, which is really cool. I think that's interesting. But it also comes as a solution to the fact that they created so many different timelines that they're like, okay, how do we tie this all together? Fuck it, it's happening in different universes. And so a writer has so much liberty to just be like, Thanos killed everybody. How do we fix this problem? Fuck it, let's go back in time. And a writer can take.
Then they spent a lot of that movie going, no, you don't understand. This is a different unit. We're not just fucking with what happened. This is some new shit. And it's like, all right, cool, man. It's like you seem a little more hung up on that than I am as an audience member. But a great example for pop culture would be something like the Star Wars and I don't know if you've ever seen any of Rian Johnson's movies, but like Brick and Looper and there was another one thrown in there.
I think I've seen Brick.
Yeah,
I've seen Looper.
Right
with Nicolas Cage.
No, it's not Cage. It's Bruce Willis and
Bruce Willis. Yes, Bruce Willis.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah.
I think is the other guy, and great original auteur. You know what I mean? Like if anything, give that motherfucker some money and a camera and let him go do his fucking thing. I thought Brick was a great noir, take on the whole thing. But he, you give him somebody else's little universe and something where the audience is kind of emotionally tied to it. Uh-huh. It's kind of like, I understand, like, I've heard, you brought up the Mormons. I've heard evangelicals make, cases against the Mormons for the basic, the audacity that you would go in there and write another book of the gospel. And it's like, yeah, you're treading on fucking fine ground right there, man. There's gonna be somebody that's not gonna like your interpretation of that. But, the way I put it, man, is basically, it's like, I really like this Jesus guy. What if he went to space? Yeah. It's like, okay. But yeah, opening up that kind of door of going like, I think the line that keeps getting thrown around about Johnson was, subverting expectations. And it's like, okay, but if you're doing a reinterpretation, by all means, you know what I mean? Something like, I think we brought this up on the last podcast where it was, you got Beowulf and then that book that came out in the 70s, Grendel, where it's retelling the entire story from his perspective. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, going to be some difference. Yeah. But if you're doing a direct sequel to something where it's like, okay, expectation, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. People have they're engaged to that story in a certain way.
They're going to have a visceral fucking reaction to that shit, man.
That's like busting out like, no, Darth Vader wasn't his father.
Well, it tied in with some of the... Yeah, it's like, he was lying. But, all right, J.J. Abrams was the guy that kind of gave the reins to that one, and people kind of shit on him for what he did with those the Star Trek movies. But I think Abrams did a very intelligent thing, which was that first Star Trek movie he did, he basically went, okay, same thing. This is a different timeline. Yeah. We're going to set this up right in the beginning. This thing happens differently. Yeah. So all this other stuff that, it's like, it didn't happen like that. It's like, no, didn't happen like that in that one. In this one, it's exactly how it happened. Because I said so. I am the author. I get to fucking dictate.
I get to do this. And it's a good freedom, man. It's not necessarily a bad thing to give yourself like we said, like right now we were talking about no filter. It's you shouldn't have to be stuck to anything, man, and you should be allowed to explore things in different ways. Right now that we were talking about Mormonism, one thing that struck me was that in Mormonism, you don't have to be baptized when you're born. You could be going until you're like 30 or 40, man, and then you open the book, and then you're suddenly touched by it, and then you're like, you know what? I see it, I feel it, I'm gonna go get baptized. So it's not so forced on you, and I think it's good for things to. I thought that was a really interesting aspect of it, because it's good for things to be able to, for you to be able to engage them and on your own time, your own way. And when it comes to literature, fiction written by whatever author, it's good to always keep in mind there is an author behind it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for kind of the shared story, say like a folktale type of thing, where it's like I'm trying to remember who I was listening to talk about that, but like telling like, you know, fairy tales or you know, the kind of stories you tell to your kids, and it's like, you know, oh, you know, my grandma would tell it and it's like this, or my mom would tell it and it's like this. She'd add this little detail to it, and it's like that is very much an interesting little experiment and kind of like playing around with our shared, not history, that would be the wrong term, but kind of shared narrative. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, which detail does, I mean, in that sense, you go, okay, what detail stands out to you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like you emphasize this, I emphasize this, and then kind of together we get this kind of collage of kind of human experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, interesting enough, I think that would be something very interesting in terms of the non-central or decentralized conversation around the decentralization. Is it's like, you know, very much so the dialogue that we're kind of having socially at this point around a wide variety of topics. I mean, you could say politics, but like everything, you know, is politics at this point. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Pick a team, pussy, and start fighting. I'd rather just, I'd rather sit on the sidelines and just drop in a comment every once in a while. But, I don't think you can really get, a great example is I was listening to something, they were talking about, variety of news sources. And they basically did a survey where they were like, okay, what's your self-identified, you know, affiliation for this, that, and the other, and how many different news sources are you listening to? You know, are you listening to, you know, these guys over here and these over here and that over here? And you're finding more and more that people are kind of closing up. And it's funny because, and the thing that kind of shocked me about it was they were finding that the folks on the more conservative side of the spectrums were listening to a wider variety of news sources. And I think that's almost out of like desperation, because the conservative mindset is very much like, we do this. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to understand that weirdo over there that's doing the weird shit, you got to fucking listen to their shit. Whereas if, you know, you're more out on the, socially liberal, and that's not even a correct term. So let's say like just out on the fringe somewhere, you know, whether it's ideologically or whether it's, you know, just socially, your social group in some sense. It's like, well, you know, we're out here experimenting with shit. So like, you know, we kind of figure like, you know, you're experimenting with shit, but you know what we're talking about. But if you're doing something we don't agree with, then yada, yada. And there seems to be almost almost the farther you get away from the, you know, social norm, which has less and less meaning every day at this point, your bubble gets a little bit smaller because you don't have that touchstone. You can't go back and go, okay, what am I comparing this against? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like some of the most fascinating, like, philosophical authors I've ever read have been like staunch Roman Catholic. You know what I'm saying? Which is, it almost gives you that, I'm trying to remember who it was talking about that specifically, but the idea of if you have a box that you kind of encapsulate your existence in, you can know which direction you're going in. It's like, okay, I'm going to go play out on this fringe of it, but then I can come back, and then I can go over here, and then I can come back. And by having that solid base of
ground
reference, basically, you know what I mean? You allow yourself a little more freedom. You know, it's like you're tethering yourself. It's like, yeah, but if you're in the middle of the ocean, you know, if you just start swimming in a random direction, you got to have some sense of direction here. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's got to be a compass, and not necessarily a guiding, but a reference point. How do I get back to the place? I know what I thought when I was here. So I wanted to explore over here. But now that I'm over here, I have no idea how to get back to that place that I was. So you can't compare and contrast. It's like you're just a traveling bubble at that point with a lack of connection. are very tenuous connection to what's going on around you. Is any of this making sense? I know I've had a bit of vodka at this point.
I feel that it's like, it's very, very important to stand your ground, to seek truths, and to be honest to those truths, but not allowing your truths to become prejudices into things that you don't know. But
I mean, there is some things that you have to. There's certain things that you can only lead by faith. And I'm a very strong believer in that, because there's certain things in the world that you can't see, either like physically and metaphorically. Like, I can see them, but just as an example is what I'm saying. Like, I may be able to see them, but you may not be able to see them completely.
Yeah, okay.
And Sean may see the same thing, but from a different angle. So my only point is, I understand that a lot of people will say, well, that's due to perspective, but I do feel that there's certain things that you can only lead by faith. It's like for, and again, another very vague example. I don't want to go into a lot of detail of it, but like people that believe, that believe in a certain God or whatever, you believe in that because of whatever your reasons may be. I'm not gonna push religion on you, but whatever brought you to that faith, like, that's exactly what it is. Like, and there's nothing. What I'm saying is, there's nothing that is gonna 100% prove that until at some point. This part's coming from me. I feel that at one point, like you were saying earlier, like the whole truth will unveil. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really do believe that the world is, we're gonna get to one point. I don't know when that is, but I do believe that there is one point where we're gonna be like, oh, okay, well, that's what we should have believed in or whatever.
Yeah.
And see, which leads me to another point. Like, no disrespect or anything, but anybody that's an atheist, like, I really don't
fully understand. When talking about faith shouldn't be, as far as I see it, and these are very strict opinions, but faith shouldn't be something that blinds you. The faith that you put into the things that you do, the directions you take, is the faith that you have on yourself. It's the faith that you have on that God. So, it's like he said, it's that reference point, that coming back to your truths. Sure, we never know what direction the things we are doing are going to take us. But there should definitely be conviction in what you do, and that's where that faith comes in.
Well,
but the faith shouldn't be like, I'm walking blindly. Y a lo mejor, it's more like what I'm doing.
But you can't.
Is true to me.
Yeah, I get that, but you also can't be like. You can't be like this is what it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, but at the same time, you can't doubt your faith, because that's what faith is. Faith is believing without seeing, basically, like seeing physically, or you know what I'm saying. And it's also you not being able to 100% prove a point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I've run into that, like a lot of the times, like how can I explain it? Like there's a lot, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not trying to shit on any religion or anything like that, but if like, for example, if there's a God, right? If there, I'm not saying there's not, but I'm specifically saying a God, like the God of the sun or the God of whatever, That's what I'm referring to. So like, if there's this God, right? And if that God tells you what you should do to serve me is like kill other people or kill yourself, or like the suicide bombers and shit like that. Like, I don't I don't see how that would be something that actually comes to the better humanity, or that comes from God, that is actually trying to lead you, you know, in a certain direction or whatever. But what I'm saying is, whatever drove that person to that was their faith, or whatever it was that they believed in. Because those people, I guarantee you, those people up until the point that they died, they believed truly, wholeheartedly, that they were doing what they were supposed to do. See what I'm saying?
I'll throw a little caveat in there, man, because I think there are a lot of, and especially when it comes to something like that, the extreme behavior. I think a great example coming up here on the September 11th anniversary, man. Like the
oh shit, that's in what 3 days.
3 days, man. But yeah,
I don't mean to sound like a dick, but I forgot about that. Whoops.
Never forget. I forgot. But yeah, a lot of the when the story started coming out around that, and they were like, "Oh yeah, these guys were going to strip clubs and drinking liquor and all this shit." And basically, the way it kind of seemed to me was like, I've seen this in very, very much lesser and tamer behavior, where it's like, that doesn't make sense to me, but I mean, all right, fuck it, man. If that's the way it is, that's the way it is. Whereas, kind of the way, all right, what I was getting from what you were talking about, man, was like, okay, if let's say you're going to praise the sun, well, what do we actually know about the sun? You know, it burns bright, it's a bunch of hydrogen, yada yada, all this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we travel around it. You know, apparently it doesn't travel around us. You know what I'm saying? But when you start going,
no, but see, even those facts that you stated,
right? That's
proven. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you have a lot of people that go like, "Oh, it's an illusion. It's a test of."
No. But hold on, that's scientifically proven.
But that's what I'm saying, though. If it doesn't jibe, if you cannot, what's the word I'm looking for here? If you can't bring that together, the metaphysical and the
but that's because of lack of education or whatever. But my only point, and it's not even pushback. My only point to what you're saying is, like, those are actually things that you can prove. But on the same token,
right?
Again, I'm probably too stupid to explain this, but not unless I'm missing something. Like, even that's not entirely 100% solid truth.
Like, you know, like, okay, so
but it's the closest to scientifically being proven. So my only point is, with those things, anybody that tells you otherwise, like, for example,
right,
like all this shit that space is fake. Like, if somebody were to tell you, "Hey man, the sun is fake," well, then you kind of know that it's like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Oh, there's science, you know, that says that.
Okay, but I think about like
there's
this.
Facts there. That doesn't. What I'm saying is, it doesn't really completely coincide and connect with, like, having the faith of like believing in something that you can't necessarily see.
I think what you're saying is true, that you definitely need to dive if you're looking for an explanation of something, you definitely need to dive scientifically into it. I do think that a spiritual experience.
To be clear, what I was pointing more towards was the disconnect that people tend to have between the metaphysical and their physical. It's like, they'll accept fucking cell phones and technology all day long, but, you know,
because they can see it and feel it and touch it.
But that's what I'm getting. If your metaphysical doesn't in some way, what's the whole hermetic thing?
It's a certain necessity.
Well, like the hermetic idea of so as above, so below type of thing. It's like, if the thing that you cannot prove but you kind of believe in doesn't jibe, you know, if the square won't fit in the round hole, then maybe pick a different fucking block, dog, or shave the edges off or something.
Like, okay, so I'm gonna say a couple of things. Like, when it comes to faith and other people's faith, I don't really feel that I can speak for other people's faith, and I do think that in my personal life, I like to put faith into the things that I do. And I do like to practice kindness. And I think kindness is a very important aspect of humanity in keeping the ball rolling, growing, and being humane. You know, kindness to yourself, to other people. When it comes to the spiritual experience, I was recently doing at the Far Community Theater the Tales of the Hidalgo Pump House, and there is a scene where this actually happened here in the valley, where this lady named Pala sees the apparition of Jesus on a tortilla, right? Okay. So the guy, if he would have been the one to get that tortilla, I always make the joke, he would have just thrown some beans on it, you know, and he would have just munched on the tortilla. But she saw the tortilla, and it spoke for something in her life. It was a miracle that came specifically to her. Whether that miracle is something entirely subjective or something true to the universe, you know, but it's true, because, like I was saying, there's different. We aside from the truths, like scientific truths, there is the subjective experience of everything. We were talking about journalism. There is the facts in journalism, but no matter what the author of the material, will have some subjectivity to it, unless they're just strictly saying facts. But if they put some sort of opinion or something, it becomes a bit subjective. We reflect ourselves into the things that we do. This table, any other species, like a bird, might stand on it, and it's not going to be a table to the bird. It's just going to be a platform. But a human sees it, and it's like it's a table. It has the four legs. And I can eat on it. It reflects a certain aspect of our needs, our reality, our comforts. It explains a lot of who we are, and so that is the spiritual experience, man. It's the way. I recently put this in a poem. It's the way you lay your soul, your being, your mind into the things that you do, and it connects to you, subjectively to you. So I think that the spiritual experience is a very personal experience. The miracle comes to those who specifically are in need or are in search for that miracle. And so that's part of the reason why I cannot speak about anybody's faith, because it's such a personal experience for everybody that it would be intruding for me to even dare to speak about their faith. I can relay facts. I can relay scientific facts. But as soon as it becomes an argument of faith, the facts stop mattering. And you're talking about different things here. If somebody's talking about the sun is God, then I cannot talk to that person about the sun is what provides energy and blah, blah, blah.
I think the most you can hope to take from any statement like that, if somebody goes, the sun is God, you go, okay, that statement by itself means nothing to me, but coming from that individual, it's like, okay, I must now kind of orient my understanding of our communication in that context.
Yeah, and that person might write a very, very interesting, beautiful poem that is universally true to a lot of people about how the sun touches them and brings life to them and provides a sense of being for them. All of a sudden, you are moved by their spirit, you know. So faith is a complicated thing to talk about, and it's something that definitely, when it comes to dealing with norms and all that, I tend to remain skeptical about, but not in the sense of like negating it.
Well, if I can make an attempt here to like tiptoe us a little bit back out of that little minefield, let's say in terms of our art, this was a thought I was having, and like most things, I was trying to write a fucking joke, but the idea kind of came to me, or the premise I was working around was basically like, I do consider myself an artist, but there is no prestige or what's the word I'm looking for here? There's no honor in that for me, in the sense that I don't look at the artist as like, the bringer of understanding and it's like, no. The artist is that person that they're wrestling with thoughts to the point where they do a thing, and maybe they give it a name, maybe they don't. I mean, how many times do you walk into like an art exhibit and it's like, untitled number 37. Yeah. And it's like, but I think the art and I hesitate to even use the word true, but the art in the sense of the explorative is kind of they do something and they go, does this make sense to you? Like this means something to me somehow, but does this make sense to you? You know what I mean? Like the only reason to show it, I mean, you get a lot of people that do stuff and then they never show it to anyone. You know what I mean?
But then again, it goes back to the thing that we were saying, like it's based on interpretation of like whoever's receiving. But I mean, if you're relating it to that, I mean, it is, again, not unless I miss something off of what you're saying, but it still is like an art form, like what we do, whether it be poetry or comedy or whatever. I do see it as an art, but going with what you're saying, like whatever it is that you deliver, written work, poetry or whatever, if I read it and I get something different from it other than what you really meant, that's on me. And that's called responsibility to the reader, not to the writer, because you probably meant it in a whole different type of way, but the reader took it a different way.
I'm almost making the argument that the artist almost has no claim. Like, don't be wrong, what thought you went into it. I'm assuming anybody who creates something has had an inspiration or an intent with it. But at that point where it is a thing, it exists in the world, and then you kind of throw it out there, it's if somebody comes back and goes like, oh, this, that, and the other, and it's like, no, you got it all wrong. It's like, no. They're looking at something that is there, that exists in the world, and they're interacting with it, even if it's just on a visual interpretation level. So it's, again, I think the artist is almost the person asking questions without not even fully understanding the question in some sense.
But it's a question that's set out there. I like that. And
I don't. It frustrates the shit out of
me. No, like. In order for an art piece to transcend, it has to take a life of its own. When you bring something to life, it has a life of its own. You give a child birth, you cannot claim that you're gonna know everything that child is gonna do, that you're gonna be able to dictate. You can force them to follow a certain career, let's say, but you cannot dictate whether that's going to make them happy, whether they're going to be able to truly evolve as a person within that line of work. So the way to really, really transcend, like you can tell that child, whatever it is you do it with passion, do it because that's what you love to do. And those are things that are more universal, and it'll take a life of its own once it reaches that other person. And that's the way it really transcends. If you're trying to dictate the type of life it's going to take, then it's not transcending. And that's the difference between art. When you're dealing with things like science, mathematics, all those types of things, they have a specific answers. And those numbers can also be placed in art in the sense that there is universal ideas. Like I said right now, kindness, even hate. You can say that those are fixed numbers, but they take a life of their own in every place in which they land. And that's the only way that these ideas really transcend. You have to remember that as an artist, you don't hold the answer. You're no hero to the universe. You're one in many, many expressions. And if you're able to, if you do something and you spark up something, whichever that is, that's something to be completely proud about. But there is definitely no like you say honor and say like no like I did it, I put that into that person. No, man, you opened up the question. Yeah. So I think that's the true nature of transcending.
I was listening to, I don't know if y'all familiar with Eric Weinstein, but he's a
Yeah. Well, I heard from him when he was on the Rogan podcast.
That's right. I think we talked about that briefly. He's got his own podcast project that he's doing right now, and part of what he's doing is kind of not even presenting these ideas, but he's having guys like Werner Herzog on, the director, and like kind of it's kind of in the same sense that I'm trying to go out with this idea of like going like, okay, here's the thing as it exists. Like, here's an idea that I have about it. Does this make sense in somehow? But he was talking specifically about, what's his name? Wallace, something. One of the two guys that was involved with he was bringing up the example of the double helix in biology and the structure of DNA. And apparently that original paper that they put forward was never peer reviewed. They just submitted it to the journal, and the editor, if I recall the quote correctly, basically said, I can't, like, I definitely, I feel as if I gave this out and had this like kind of reviewed, it would, the exact phrasing escapes me at the moment, but the basic idea was like, if I don't just like put this idea out, it's going to be dissected to the point of meaninglessness. Mm-hmm. And then so it was kind of like, we talked about this with jokes where it's like, sometimes you just got to throw the joke like a grenade and then just like step back and go, okay, let's see what happens type of shit, right?
Throw it and walk away.
Yeah. But then there was another quote from, I believe it was Wallace, where he basically said, see if I can get this right here. We have to be able to, at a certain point when you're going into the places where nobody's really been before, when you're kind of out there on the limb conceptually, you should almost be exploring the places where you're uncomfortable, where there is no reference point. It's, which again goes back to the idea of like, you kind of have to have at least that one, tethering point so that you can make these, leaps of assumption and intuition, so that maybe you get out there and you go like, I've kind of put forth this majestic, wide reaching, conceptual, idea, for lack of a better term. And maybe it's wrong. Maybe somebody comes along and just chews it to fucking bits and goes, you're wrong here, you're wrong here. But to make those giant leaps of assumption, you can't play within the safe spaces, in a sense. Kind of take that to the idea of, that's what I think, that's where I was getting at with the idea of the artist kind of being like, all these ideas are in here. They're not connected in any solid fashion. They're bumping up against each other and all the symbolism and the concepts, and maybe it's just sometimes you get hung up on like a word, like what the fuck does that, I use this, like I know what this means, but I don't really know how it fits, but I feel that that's the right fucking thing. And if you don't just kind of jump from, use that as the jumping point and then just go out into the weird places, we're just gonna end up repeating things to each other. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we might as well just fucking smile and nod, because you're not fucking communicating anything of any importance. A great example, kind of that, I was listening to a conversation with Steven Pinker. He's a sociologist, philosopher. He's the guy who wrote Angels of Our Better Nature, I believe. He's one of the main people that's out there at this point trying to make the argument that, like, yes, we can see all the horrible things going on in the world, but like statistically, by the numbers, if we do the math, things are way fucking better now than they've ever fucking been, right? And the guy he was talking with was talking about the idea of, he's kept throwing out, Western civilization and Judeo-Christian values. And Pinker kind of stops him and he goes, what he was specifically talking about was the idea of the, and let me get the right word on this, the importance of the individual in Western society, Judeo-Christian, whatever. It's like the center of importance lies within the individual. And Pinker kind of stops him and he goes, well, technically speaking, that's not really Judeo, because if you go back, there were the chosen people and everybody else was just kind of out there, the unwashed masses. And like, the guy that was interviewing him kind of pauses and he goes, okay. But without that starting place of like, okay, here are the Israelites and they are the chosen people. But as individuals, they must make those choices. You know what I mean? The onus of responsibility for, not divinity, obviously that's a wrong word, but let's say, and not even worship, but the importance of, and the responsibility of being the devout individual lies with each and every individual person. You know what I'm saying? But if you don't have that jumping point, you know what I mean, then you don't get to, say, the Enlightenment in, a couple hundred years back, where it's like, oh shit, every individual has to take that responsibility of being, the witness and the creator at the same time. Kind of going like, I must be important to myself so that I can be important to my community, so that my community can go forth and be important on the growth of the world. And you don't get that if you don't start off with somebody had to be important first. So kind of jumping up that chain of logic, really. It's like, the decentralization thing. We don't get to where we are right now with the technology and all this if, some fucking robber baron back in the 1800s didn't go, fuck it, we're putting in, electric lines. It's like if one person didn't come forward and put the cash down and fucking, bring thousands of people together and put that shit forward. The railroads being another example where it's like, okay, we have this idea now that somehow as a nation we can go forward and do like these grand things. Yeah, but if somebody doesn't have the idea and kind of have a vision of the individual steps that need to be taken, a little bit of gas there, we don't get to the grand picture. It all kind of comes together in the end, and it looks like, we did this on purpose, and it was like, no, we kind of fucking stumbled into this shit. You know what I mean?
There's always the question of whether Socrates, when he would go and ask his questions of skepticism, whether he was just really sitting there just asking questions because that's the question that came to his head, or whether there was an objective behind the questions, right? And that's an open-ended question, but there is an objective to the arts that we do, even though it is subjective, being that it's art. But there is things that you're trying to get a person to think about, things that you're trying to get a person to feel, and mainly it's because you went through asking yourself those questions. You went through trying to understand those feelings, and like I said, it takes a life of its own. Yet, life, how do I put this? Humanity is not because we're being subjective or whatnot are we forced to all of a sudden just act at random, right? There is such thing as vision, and being able to share that vision. And so even in the subject of decentralization, in that when I went to Lamar, when I was at Options, I was like, there was still a teacher there. There was it wasn't like, oh, no teacher there.
You went to Options?
Yeah. Everybody's studying in their own. There was a teacher there that had the experience, had the bigger vision, understood the objectives, and you could go and talk to that teacher. So definitely, everything has a starting point, and that starting point doesn't that doesn't necessarily go away. It just it adapts itself better to the new situations and whatnot, right? But there's definitely an objective, an idea that goes behind what you do. But the idea is not the person to whom you're talking to. The idea is a thing of its own, and then that person takes it. But the person standing before you isn't that idea. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that.
No, you are, but. Well, I mean, finish your point though. 'Cause I don't wanna...
This might be a sense of like the three blind men trying to describe the elephants. Like, oh,
I think we are, man.
one guy on the trunk going, "Oh, it's a snake," and the other guy on the leg going, "Ah, it's a tree."
Yeah.
you sound like a blind man trying to choose his favorite porno.
Yeah.
Okay, we're coming up on the first hour here. To kind of close this out, I want to throw this out to you because I was thinking of this while you were talking about it. There's an Alan Watts anecdote that he tells in one of his lectures on Zen Buddhism, and he's talking about a friend of his who had gone to the monastery, and they give you a koan. You know what I mean? What is the sound of one hand clapping? That kind of shit. Okay. And his koan was basically, "Who are you?" And he'd go in and he'd give some answer, and the Roshi would go, "No," and come back tomorrow. And at one point, he kind of like, as he's walking towards the hall to go meet with the Roshi, he looks down and there's a bullfrog on the ground. So he picks it up and he stuffs it in his robe, and he gets in there and the Roshi goes, "Who are you?" And he pulls out the toad or he pulls out the bullfrog like that. And the Roshi looks at it and he goes, "Nah, too high concept."
Yeah.
All right. So let's take a quick little break. We'll come back.